right, welcome everybody to Going Deep. Brandon Angelo, Matt Waldman. We're here once again. We're going to talk about what do we look for, specifically non-physical items that we look for with quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. You know, those positions that we scout. And then we'll talk about maybe the most surprising player in this draft class that we've watched thus far. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about the combination of Matt Nagy and Jackson Dart. Yeah. Emmett Johnson, running back out of Nebraska. We'll talk a little bit about him. And if we have time, maybe we'll talk about this whole model idea of slot percentage, time spent in the slot, and how important that might be for today's game. And are there exceptions to that rule? And who were those exceptions to that rule? So, we've got a pretty loaded show that we can go through. We'll see how much we get through. So let's start this way, Brandon. What is a key non-physical item that you look for with a quarterback?
Oh, good question. I think probably the biggest thing for quarterbacks is being able to literally just manage a game, like managing the tempo of the offense, understanding what looks you're seeing, how those looks are going to vary through four quarters. And that's the thing is quarterbacks are extremely mental, emotional position where you are thinking, feeling, seeing, and all of that information given to you on a single play might be used the next down, the next quarter, 3 months from now, and using a lot of that to set up potentially different shots, different explosives. And that's where it's different. It's just learning to manage that piece of it. Because very rarely that does the best athlete on the field, who's the quarterback, step into the NFL and completely dominate. Never happens. Like Josh Allen, nope, took him a little while to get the wheels under him. Guys like Will Levis didn't pan out. Trey Lance, nope. Zach Wilson, nope. You can kind of keep going down the list of guys who didn't pan out. And the reason is never physical, right? Those guys had immense physical abilities, but they never quite grasped the ability to actually manage the football game, right? That's in my opinion, your number one role as a quarterback is managing down to down, quarter to quarter, game to game, understanding what you're seeing, how to play off of that. And also, too, just being Clark Kent, you need to be Clark Kent. You don't have to be Superman all the time. That's a big part of it. And that's the next step for a lot of quarterbacks who have a lot of physical ability. It's just being okay with the mundane, right? If the team you're playing has two of their interior linemen on IR, well, then this might be a very run heavy game if you have good guard play and good center play, right? But you might have to throw for 350 yards and 2 touchdowns. That might not have to be in the cards. And so week to week, that kind of changes, understanding kind of the ebbs and flows of that, and just kind of playing the position in a managerial perspective. And that's a huge one, I think, for quarterbacks coming into the NFL now. It's, especially with more than 12 and 13 personnel, where you have to be a little more diligent with your checks and understanding defensive assignments, understanding, I just listened to Trevor Lawrence talk about Liam Cohen, and he said the difference between Cohen's offense and any ones that he's been in is he'll give you the right answer on a given play, but he'll give you three answers. And it's up to you to choose the right one. He'll give you 3 play calls. And it's up to the quarterback to get the offense in the right look based on what he's seeing. He's in the driver's seat, right? So he's the one seeing what the likely defensive assignments are, what their look is, if there's any tells based on alignment, and then changing the play, shifting the formation, giving a different motion to get them in the right play to have the highest degree of success from a probability perspective. So that's the role, right? We think of the physical, but it's not until you can grasp that piece of it that you ascend, from that middle of the pack in the NFL, like quarterback 16 to 18, to being a top 3 to 5 guy, because all those traits, and the 3 to 5 is a marriage of the physical, mental, emotional, and the ability to manage the game down to down, play to play, game to game.
Well, it's a great answer, and I'm going to piggyback on your answer and then give one of my own. But just to add to it, just to give specifics, think about, I've watched about 4 or 5 of the prospects thus far in the past week. And one of the common factors that I see this year, and every year most of the time, is can they manage the black zone and can they manage the red zone? And really the black zone is the one that they really fuck up most of the time, okay? It's just because they're so used to being the physically dominant piece on the board that they default into, I can outrun, I can buy more time, I can use my arm to make a play. And we need a play. It's 3rd down, and it's 3rd and 7, or it's 2nd and 12, and if I just buy enough time, I can make a big play here. The problem is that you get to the NFL, or you play some decent teams in the college game, and they run into this a little bit more often in college, against the better teams. But then in the NFL, they run into it like every time they're in this situation, and it beats them down. And what happens is you'll see things like, they're up by 4 or they're down by a touchdown. It's a close game, whether it's a lead or whether it's or whether they're slightly behind and they're backed up inside their own 20 and they have a check down and it's right in front of their face and it's right away, and they've already diagnosed that there's pressure coming. And instead of throwing the ball to the check down, they do a spin and roll, like the most inefficient, dynamic way to try and get away from pressure, end up retreating from pressure, and wind up taking sacks or having to throw the ball into a thicket of defenders. They take risks that aren't necessary. It's like the running back who bounces things outside when the 2 yards was sufficient to keep the playbook open. So you see this a lot with young quarterbacks. I've just watched Taylon Green, and Taylon Green, there's a lot of good things about his game, but one of the things that happens with him is he tries to be a hero. I would say Ty Simpson, even more so. Ty Simpson, I would say some of his game management stuff is just undercuts the good things that he can do. And then I would talk about, Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier is kind of up and down in that category. Like sometimes it's really good, and sometimes you're like, yeah, dude, go away. Even Fernando Mendoza, as much as I like him, and we'll talk about him more in the future, the one weakness that he can have and that he has shown is in the black zone. He tries to be a hero in certain situations that he shouldn't. This is a common thing with young quarterbacks. And the quarterbacks who get better are the ones that figure out that they can't be a hero and they have to manage that. So, I just wanted to give an example of kind of how that is. Sure. They pass up checkdowns. They try to they pass up opportunities to throw the ball away, to buy more time than they should. Sometimes you need, as a quarterback, and this is part of managing the game and looking at the field, like you said, looking at things pre-snap and going, what's the solution here? You may have 4 routes that you're considering, and you're looking at all the coverage, and well, if the coverage does this and I do this, if then, if that, and they can whiteboard it to death, and John Gruden's going to be super impressed with you, and and then all the NFL reporters are going to talk about how Desmond Ridder aced the whiteboard. But here's the problem, okay? The difference between Desmond Ridder and Phillip Rivers, okay? There's a vast difference, but the thing that I can pinpoint in this area that comes down to is Desmond Ridder can recite all the possibilities of what can happen on the whiteboard. Phillip Rivers is going to, amble up to the line, probably adjust his hernia, and then and then look at the line and go, and look at the field and go, you know what? It's basically a one route moment right now.
Yeah, this is where I'm going.
This is where I'm going, and
Yeah.
if it's not there, I'm throwing the ball away. If I can't throw the ball away, I'm just taking the sack. I'm just going down. And it's knowing those three things, and you know that if you do those other two bad things, that it's not as bad than what Desmond Ridder would likely have done, which is thrown a pick six. Or fumbled the ball trying to extend the run,
Sure.
or Zach Wilson, or all the guys that you mentioned. And that's the thing, is like the young guys see all the possibilities, you know, and so it's like the old Jamaican saying that a new broom sweeps clean, but the old broom knows all the corners. And it's kind of like Phillip Rivers is like, okay, I've filtered it down. This is what's possible. Let's do these things, and we're going to keep us competitive. Where the young guys are like, I can do all this, and then they're bouncing around everywhere.
It's. I always say it's possible versus probable, right? If you're a young quarterback, you might see the second percentile outcome, right? It's still possible, right?
Yeah.
But it's not probable. Like, you get and that's the difference. That's a great perspective, right? Phillip Rivers versus a guy like Desmond Ridder, where Phillip Rivers will walk up to the line of scrimmage and understand what the most probable outcome is on each route that the receivers are running, receivers, tight ends, backs, and where he's going with football in what sequential order, right? As a younger player, you kind of say, okay, if the safety's doing this, I'm going to go here. But what if it's not open? Okay, I'm going to buy some time and make it open. No, it doesn't work in the NFL. So the windows are so much smaller. The players are so much better athletically that you're not going to be able to do that down to down like you did in college. And so that's a great point, because I think it's possible versus probable, right? Really good quarterbacks, they just take the highest probability outcome most of the time and live the fight until they're down.
Yeah. And then those great plays that we see, I mean, they happen 2 to 3 times a game. And they're the difference between being a good starting quarterback and an elite quarterback. Okay. So those are the best of the best. And even then, those guys are pounded in their head, don't try to do this every down. There's times where you've got to try, but don't try and do it all the time. Because if you have to try and do it all the time, you're Caleb Williams last year or 2024. When you don't have to do it all the time, you're Caleb Williams at the end of the game. And you can see the difference of what that looks like, because now you're not wasting bandwidth and energy trying to do the improbable on every play, and your team's putting you in position where you don't have to. So the thing that I would say that's the advanced quarterbacking part of that you would say the difference between, say, Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. You know, I know that Alex Smith, let's say even like Kirk Cousins, like good Kirk Cousins and Patrick Mahomes. I would say the difference between those two guys is what I would call processing confidence. Processing, to me, I would define it as that it's IDing the decision, the best possible decision, and executing it with immediate confidence. And so what's missing oftentimes is that, again, the whiteboarding. You know, we're going to hear a lot about that in the next couple of, 6 weeks, about how good the whiteboard players these guys are. But the thing is Alex Smith could probably get a PhD in the whiteboard. But in whatever year he was as a Pro Bowl quarterback, when they're in the playoffs and it's 3rd and 16, and you know that and he knows what the defense is going to give him, and it's not a high probability thing, but he knows he's going to have to look for it, because that's what they're cornering it, because this is a good defense and they can filter it down to this. Or they're going to say, yeah, you got to hit the dig where you've got 3 defenders in the area and you've got to place it perfectly. It's got to be placed perfectly. Alex Smith is going to hitch 2 times before he throws that ball, and it's late and it's ill placed and inaccurate more times than not. And that's the ball game. Patrick Mahomes, the moment he sees the opening, he sees everything enough and has the confidence to go now. Whereas with like, what was the good example? Oh, in the Super Bowl, there's a video out, I think, on Instagram, on X, where Love, the defensive back Love for the Seahawks, is talking about Drake May, and he's like Drake May's playing like a young quarterback where he's got to confirm that it's open. And that's
him versus Stafford. He was talking about
versus Stafford.
He's not like Stafford or something.
Who's not? Yeah, he's not like Stafford, who's just throwing it without even looking at it. But the thing is what he really means, if I'm going to break it down to the layperson, would be Stafford's reading the leverage. And he knows the certain point before the break of the ball, or where the safety is going to move, or what happens even late pre-snap, that he knows based on his experience with coverage and versus what they can do, even the players adjacent to the route that he's actually going to be targeting, like the guy next to it that's covering somebody else who could peel off. He knows those angles well enough that he knows, if I see anything different than this shape, or this shape happens here, and I see the receiver at this point at the top of my drop, the ball's coming out. Like, I don't even have to see it open. Whereas with Drake May or Alex Smith or a lot of young quarterbacks, not only do they have to see the guy make the break, they have to see the guy get some separation against the corner. And by then, it's way too late. And that's confidence. That's the confidence part of processing, is that they saw the same thing Stafford saw, but they weren't confident to go, let it rip. They're like, are you sure? Am I sure? Am I sure? And then
that was I think, bringing up Drake May is a really good point, because as good of a season as he had, he didn't face a lot of really high end defenses.
Yeah.
Right. So you get to a point where you're facing the best defense in football, and you can't be late on throws. Like,
No.
you can't spend time in the pocket waiting for guys to pitch open. And that's kind of what happened, I think, a lot in that game too, is, you kind of see Drake's internal clock going and no one's there, and he's afraid to throw them open. He's afraid to throw into the shorter windows. And when the window is kind of closing, he didn't have an answer for it. And that's a very common thing for young quarterbacks. And obviously having Josh McDaniel, who's a great offensive coordinator, like, there's going to be some times when your coordinator can't give you the solutions because you might not have the personnel. Like, if you look at the personnel the Patriots tried out, Kayshon Boutte, Demario Douglas, Stephon Diggs, Mac Hollins, like, these are not massive man coverage winners anymore. Like, Kayshon Boutte might beat you on some deep patterns, some posts and
back shoulders,
and go balls. Like, Stephon Diggs isn't Stephon Diggs of 5 years ago. Mac Hollins, I don't know why he sees the field so much in 11 personnel, but he's fine. But these are not guys where you're going to be getting a ton of great separation against your Witherspoons and that defense of Julian Love and what they have in the back end there. So you're going to have to take more risk in order to let those guys go make plays that you make for them. And that's just not what happened. And that's the difference, I think, too, between a Caleb Williams and a Drake May.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where Williams will take those risks and time them with a little bit better confidence. And that's going to be the next step in Drake May's game too, is just getting confident in making plays for your playmakers on a down-to-down basis against really good defenses.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think that one of the things that we need to understand too, that I just want to make a final point about quarterback before we move on to running back, is that I would argue this is something that I've kind of not been able to articulate in recent years, but I've finally kind of realized what I would say is this. Drake May is a good example why it's important to consider strength of schedule when evaluating an NFL talent, but I would argue that if you're evaluating a Division I talent, it's not as important when you're evaluating a college player or a college quarterback as it is when you're evaluating an NFL quarterback. Because in college, nobody's specifically game planning towards a player. They don't have enough tape. They don't have enough time, and they're really trying to just physically dominate you and use some strategy that will fool young guys even as good as they are athletically. But they're not going, we have a book on Drake May, and we're gonna enact that book on you. In the NFL, after a year, they go, we have a book. We think we know what he can and can't do well. And if our personnel matches, here's the things we're going to try. If it doesn't, here's the things another team's going to try. And if you're a bad team, the difference, even though statistically it doesn't look like there's a big difference, the margin for error difference between a good passing defense that matches up well against May and a bad defense that doesn't match up well against him is pretty stark. And that's something that I don't think evaluators or NFL analysts sometimes understand is that difference, because they think it all matters, you know, or maybe it doesn't matter as much in the NFL. It matters more in college. I'd say it's the exact opposite.
It's absolutely the opposite. And I think you see it kind of year over year with your rookie quarterbacks entering their sophomore season in the league. The two biggest ones that are the most glaring, C.J. Stroud and Jaden Daniels. And that's, a part of it's on the coordinators to understand, like, I need to give them different solutions here. That's also part of the growth of their own game of you've banked more reps. That's great for their experience. They should be able to see more and do more with the information they have at hand. However, you banked more reps, and those freaking coordinators are across the other sideline, they know that, and they're using that as information against you. And so that's like that counterpunch that we're always talking about. And that's the important part of actually getting to that elite level, is figuring out, okay, they know XYZ. How do I combat what they know?
Yeah.
And guys like CJ Stroud's career has gone massively downhill since his rookie season.
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels obviously has been hurt, but even when he was healthy this past year, wasn't the same Jaden Daniels, right?
Yeah.
Defenses had more answers to all the problems that need to be solved. So it's like that's a huge deal when you're talking about ascending into the upper ranks of the quarterback position for the younger guys turning into sophomores.
All right, so let's go on to running backs. What's a key non-physical item with running back play?
I would say it's pretty simple, but it's just understanding down and distance.
Yes.
Like, it's just so important, and it freaking drives me absolutely nuts when it is 2nd and 2 and, inside zone run, nothing is there, okay? Just live the fight and they're down and go to 3rd and 2. But so many times you see guys go from, okay, I'll pass up the 3rd and 2 for maybe the 15-yard explosive, but the higher probability is I get tackled for another 3-yard loss, and you go from 3rd and 2 to 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. And that happens all the time. And you see that a lot. And in college, it's funny because we sometimes applaud these guys who are really good athletes for getting away with it. But then they do the same thing in the NFL, and they can't.
And they get enabled to do it.
Yeah. Correct. Like, they get applauded in college of, oh my gosh, this is so freaking good. You're incredible. Keep doing that because you're winning us games. But what happens in the NFL is you're not going to out-athlete potentially better athletes or as good as you. If they have half a step on you, you're not going to out half a step them. That's just not good. That's not how it works in the NFL. And so there's 1,000 examples, but the biggest ones across recent memory, Dave Montgomery at Iowa State. He had a rude awakening for the Bears in the NFL when he started. And a part of it was David Montgomery was so good at bouncing out runs because he was so good at negating contact. It didn't matter if you contacted him outside the numbers on 3rd and 1, he's getting the friggin' first down. He's going to find a way, right? Not at the NFL level. You're not going to be doing that down the down. Saquon Barkley ran into that early in his career, right? Big time. Where, yeah, Saquon Barkley is probably one of the freakiest athletes to ever see the position at 230 pounds, 6 feet. His physical qualities, the incredible movement skills. But still, like, you think you're going to run away from I'm Fred Warner?
He wasn't doing it against Ohio State most of the time when he had to. It's just that when he broke the big run, everybody went nuts and said, "Look at this highlight play."
It enables them.
Yes.
And you said the word, and it's such a big deal at the running back position. It's we just enable the explosives, and it doesn't matter how the hell we get them. We just want to get them. But I think it's the guys who can really just understand down and distance, live to fight another down, and that's why I really love watching, the Christian McCaffreys of the world, who people are like, oh, his yards per carry freaking stinks. I don't care. He's managing the game for that 49ers offense. That's the thing that's really important.
And before him, Frank Gore.
Correct, right? It's not about, okay, did you break a 20-yarder or not, but did you keep your offense on schedule?
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And that's a huge deal.
I love it. And that would have been my answer too, just to give a different one that's similar, but that I'll say that I look for, that I hope to see from running backs, and it's not one that, without interviewing the player, I never really truly know. I'm just looking for signs that it's likely they've done it, is that they understand box counts pre-snap. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the box of the line of scrimmage and within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, when you watch that, are they looking at the number of defenders left and right of center? And when they see shifts, does it get redistributed? And how does that look compared to where the play design is going? Because this gives you a little bit of a key as to know, who should I be watching now that the box makeup is a certain way, left or right of center, based on where we're going to run, and where are my cutbacks likely to be? Where is the play as it's designed, and they're going to keep it this way, even though I may look at it and the coach is like, I want you to run here, but the reality of it is that it's going to suck if you run it here. But the worst case scenario for you is if you cut it back, you're probably going to get the same gain as if you ran play side, but there's a bigger chance that you're going to break one. Right. And now the coach starts to trust you a little bit more because when they review the tape, they see that you saw that. Those are things that I look for as the best backs that I've seen. Have a good feel for understanding, all right, we've got 3 offensive players that are and against 2 defenders on this side who have to account for those 4 players. It doesn't mean they have to come up blocks from them, because part of the box count is also either a wide receiver who's motioning across, who's not going to block, or the quarterback who's not going to block. But like you look at, DeAndre Swift, a great example of why DeAndre Swift was so successful in Philadelphia before Eric Bieniemy got a hold of him, and gave him a bit of a conceptual adjustment in Chicago. The reason he had such great success there is that Jalen Hurts was always an extra man in the box, and it forced defenders to account for him possibly carrying the ball, and it drew them away, and it gave him inherent advantages between the number of offensive players versus defensive players. So even if it's not a situation where you have a running quarterback or one who's a dangerous runner, the fact that you can diagnose this like pre-snap within the first 10 seconds or within 5 seconds and go, okay, we've got a 4-on-3. Okay, now we've got a 5-on-5 to this side. Okay, now we've got a 5-on-3. Knowing your offensive plays well enough that you can automatically see that and go, I'm heading here or I'm cutting back here, you know.
Right.
And I think that's that's something that it may not be as intellectual as I just made it, um, but it's a feel for that too. You can do this by feel if you've been playing long enough.
For sure. I think once you've banked enough reps as a back and you've ran, a diverse number of schemes, right? Inside zone, outside zone, pin, pull, gap, whatever. Like you kind of understand the probability of success on a given play,
Yeah.
right? Based on what the defense is showing alignment wise. But also too, it matters your own personnel, right? Do you have good guard play? Do you have a great right tackle versus a poor run blocking left tackle? So that it makes you as a back make those adjustments, right? It's like the Detroit Lions when you have freaking Penei Sewell,
Yep.
right? You're going to run to his side way more often, right? So if you're Jameer Gibbs or Dave Montgomery, it's like you feel a lot more confident running behind Penei Sewell.
And the center who retired, Ragnow, when
Frank
Ragnow was
Ragnow,
out.
right?
Yeah.
You feel much better about A and B gap knowing that Frank is going to be in the right position to make your run successful. But then the next year, right, you don't have that, and you have Taylor Decker, who's obviously older, oft injured. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that run isn't going to be there, so I have to do something to make sure that Taylor's defender is a little bit more to the left so I can cut it back. Just things like that. But yeah, I think that's a great point for sure.
All right, so what about wide receiver?
Oof. Wide receiver, I think wide receiver is a really interesting one because if we talk about it at the collegiate level, I think the collegiate system, we can tie wide receiver and tight end in because I think they're similar in terms of we're talking about pass catchers.
Yeah.
Collegiate system is so freaking important, right? You look at guys who come from Ohio State, Alabama, USC versus Oregon, versus Tennessee, versus TCU. All Power 4 schools, all tons of resources, all have a bunch of 4 and 5 stars. But how they teach the position and how the expectations for those players down to down, their responsibilities could not be more different. And the success those guys have at the NFL level. TCU and Tennessee have never had a 1,000-yard receiver in the NFL. Never. Think about that. Like, that's crazy. I think Willie Galt was the only one who had the
I was going to ask.
TCU, right?
Yeah.
No,
he went to Tennessee.
Tennessee, yeah. He had like 985 yards. I looked it up. Then seconds like Juwan Jennings, like at 950 or 970, right? And then you have your Cordell Pattersons. You have your Alvin Kamara's. But you're not getting like Josh Palmer, like Quentin Johnston, Jalen Reagor, Josh Doxson. You're getting a lot of guys who never live up to expectations. Even Oregon. Like, when was the last time you saw an Oregon receiver at 1,000 yards? Like, think about it.
Ahmad Rashad? I don't know.
like seriously, it's been decades.
Yeah.
And it changes the way you evaluate the position, but also it changes the way you look at those guys coming into the NFL with what they already know. Route depths, spacings, how to attack the ball in certain situations, how to get into different zones and windows. All that stuff really matters because that is a teachable element of the position, right? How are you being educated? Brian Hartline does the best job in America. We know that. We know Ohio State receivers are going to come into the NFL ready. We're going to play on day one, right? Day one install, okay, they understand what we're doing. It's not a different language to them. And that's such a big boost to your long-term development when you get into the building day one as a professional and understand the terminology, the expectations, and all of that sort of stuff. Whereas some of the other guys, it's totally foreign. So that's a huge one. Tight end, the same thing, right? You get tight ends from like Iowa, right? It's been a freaking haven. And so that's a huge deal where there's a culture there of developing that position. And as an NFL evaluator, an general manager, you know there's enough trust built in that the prospects well educated that they will come in and learn the system quicker. We can get them on the field faster. You feel more confident giving them more capital because they can play sooner. Really big deal. Usage is one for tight ends that's super important too. Like not many tight ends under like 640 yards who've had under 640 yards is the best season have really produced really well in the NFL. That's a huge one. Because then if you're a tight end in college football and you're getting 1,000 yards, like you're the you're the focal point of your offense, right?
For sure.
You could have poor, a poor environment like Colston Loveland and injury at 649 yards, but without injury, well surpasses that obviously. But there are definitely cases like that. But I'd say the hugest one is definitely just looking at offensive system and environment and how well they can accumulate knowledge and learn and get to the next level as professionals.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely the difference between guys who show up well in camp and guys who actually are going to play and produce. And I think it's a great point. I'm going to go even more basic than that, and it's something that drives me crazy when I watch it, and I realized that if I have a theory, I believe the reason that it's not emphasized as much as it is that everything's spent too much time spent on all 22. I don't mean to say too much time, but all 22 doesn't give you the opportunity to see how a receiver tracks and catches the football. Whether you're a tight end or a receiver, all you're seeing the X's and O's, and you're seeing this all the time. So when I would see guys who were longtime analysts of this game when I was coming up and going, I've had nearly 30 years of watching all 22 tape, and all 22 tape is our Lord and Savior of football analysis. And for the most part, that's true. But I grew up watching broadcast. And one of the things that I noticed over the years is that sometimes the people who were preaching the word of the all 22 couldn't figure out whether the receiver could catch a cold or not. They could run routes. They were where they were supposed to be. All of that was fine. But whether or not they use the correct hand position based on where the route is actually, the trajectory of the route would be absolutely missing. They couldn't tell you whether or not a Robert Meacham looked like he was doing an advanced calculus problem when he was running a dig route and the ball arrived at his chest. You couldn't, it was like he was turning this into like quantum physics when it was really just about, should my hands be here? Should my hands be here? And have I practiced it enough to know, based on the trajectory of the ball, can I see that? And if I have trouble seeing that, do I need to get some LASIK surgery that might help me fix and focus on what I need to do? Or is it something that I just haven't practiced it enough? And now I'm at this level and I'm trying to practice it, but my motor skills haven't had those years of work and years of practice to compound on itself so that it's automatic for me. So, and I remember I used to watch this and I laughed because I had Sammy Coates. I remember Sammy Coates at the Senior Bowl.
Sammy Coates. I've heard that name in forever.
And I remember everyone talking about how much upside this guy had and how he was such a great athlete. And lots of talk. And I'm at the sidelines, and a colleague of mine who I've often talked about vaguely, I remember, who would meet with me outside the senior, like outside of town, because he didn't want anybody to see that he was there, or he was with one team but he's worked with two other teams and they've known him for this, but he's actually doing this now. He was a very fun person to deal with. But I remember him texting me. He was working with an AFC team at the time in the capacity of like a consultant basically working with scouts and analytics professionals together, because he was a scout, but he was also an analytics professional, and he was respected by scouts, and he was trying to bridge the gap to help them embrace what was going on. But I remember him texting me. I'm at the sideline watching. He goes, He goes, it always cracks me up. And he was a former DB in his life, like a college DB. He goes, it cracks me up. We could find out all we need to know about Sammy Coates if somebody would just put his back to a coach and have the coach throw the ball over his head while he's in a standing position. We would know what we need to know, and I would wager to bet that he would have a lot of trouble making those plays, looking up over his head as the ball comes over his head or shoulder. That's going to be a big problem for him. And sure enough, that was really the killer with him. So tracking the ball, not just over the shoulder, over the head, but is it arriving high, low? What do you do when it's in this core region of your body? When should you extend? When should you do underhand? There is not enough focus on that, and it's I hear the public whenever I show these things. They're like, I coached this on my Pop Warner team. How come these guys can't do this? And it's like the fundamentals are the fundamentals, and no matter how high you get, people lose track of those fundamentals. And the better you are at the fundamentals, the sharper the best players have unbelievable fundamentals. It's like the elite guys.
It doesn't change. And that's what people get. We're in this era of freaking the Instagram videos and the footwork stuff. It's all eyewash. The best players can do the mundane things at the highest level.
That's right.
And that's really what it is. Like Devontae Adams can give you the same 5 items in a release package the whole game. He's going to get open. You can give me your bevy of freaking 12 million releases you learned on YouTube, and you're not going anywhere.
Yeah,
they're not perfect, and that's the thing is, we talk about banking reps experience. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get to a place where there's a sense of mastery. And that's what's really important, right? Once you've done that, that's why Phillip Rivers was able to come back on at 44 years old and being a grandpa, because he had a certain level of mastery over the position, right? Understood timing and spacing and what to expect defensively. It's not just the physical stuff, or else Darius Haywood-Bay would be a pro receiver.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many guys that are first round receivers talent wise from a physical measurable standpoint who never pan out because they can't play the position.
Yeah. And it's funny, but it's the truth. Like, they can do the amazing, but they can't do the mundane. And the mundane is so important. When you watch DeAndre Hopkins do the amazing, even then the technique is usually there. It's usually rock solid there. So we've wrapped up that. We've got about 20 minutes left probably of where we want to be, and we've got a lot of subjects left. So I'm going to give you the choice of which one you want to do next, and we'll do that, and then I'll pick one after that if we have time, and we'll see. And we have another show probably of stuff we can do. So we'll see how that goes.
Cool. All right. I want to know who you can go first on this one. Who you've been surprised by the most in this cycle in a good way.
The easiest answer has been Fernando Mendoza.
Okay.
I did not watch. I didn't even know who he was until October. And I kept hearing his name. So last week, for the first time, and again, I have not watched any of his games up close other than watching the receivers, and I've seen some things, and I go, oh, that was a nice throw. Okay, that was good. But I didn't study the decision. I didn't really study, the ins and outs of the player. So the first thing I did is I popped on his Cal tape from 2024, and I was like, this guy's pretty freaking good. Like, this guy, he's aggressive downfield. He's got, that vertical range is good. I think he's got a good arm, maybe not a great arm, but it's a good enough arm for a lot of what you would want to do. Get him in a play action game, and I think he's going to be just fine. And Clint Kubiak could be very helpful in that regard. And then I look at the off-platform work. I look at the ability to stay on script and move in the pocket and throw with accuracy off of that. I look at all of the decision making and the ability to make different reads and manipulate defenders and understand where the peripheral defender is, like we talked about earlier. Where I'm looking at Taylon Green, and athletically you're like, wow, look at that, that's great. Look at the arm talent, that's great. Look at the fact, the play action fakes are beautiful, and the straightforward stuff, you're like, that's really good. But when it's like, oh, he's got him and Carson Beck, if you got to throw the ball into an area where there's possibly 2 or 3 defenders who could get to the ball from their spot based on that route, bet against them. You want to bet against the quarterback. With Fernando Mendoza, you can bet on him with that. And that's a big difference. Garrett Nussmeier, sometimes outside the numbers, not so much. With an underneath defender, not so much. But if it's a defender coming from the opposite direction, a defender coming from above, Garrett Nussmeier probably can do that. He probably does a pretty good job with that from what I've seen. But like Beck and Green, you look at those guys and you're like, yeah, if it's not a one-on-one, their game falls apart. If it's a receiver that's 1 on possibly 3 or 1 on 2, it's real shaky. And Mendoza wasn't that way. And then I watch him run. And, he looks kind of gangly when you watch him run. But I grew up a Cleveland Browns fan who made, Bernie Kosar made Phillip Rivers look like Bo Jackson. Okay, I'm just telling you that it was that bad. And he does look kind of gangly when he runs, but he runs around 20 miles an hour. Like, okay, he's fast and quick for his size.
I'm gonna pop in and say the one thing that stood out to me when I watched his tapes. I saw him play live on TV a bunch of times. I'm in the Midwest, so I watch him fairly frequently. He is so much faster than you think.
Yes.
So much faster. I watched him freaking pull an RPO and just freaking jet around a backer, and the safety overplayed it, and he's 20 yards downfield.
He looks like he runs like a scared goose, but like you can't catch him.
Fucking fast, scared goose, tell you that much.
Exactly.
It's funny.
So yeah, I was surprised because I'll just say this. I heard people saying he's the number 1 quarterback by default in this class. But if I were to compare where I've scored him at this point, he's the number 1 quarterback I've seen in the past 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and I love Caleb. But I would, if you had framed it with Caleb, I would say, do you want the guy with more upside who might have a lower trap door just in case certain bad factors conspire and he doesn't grow? Caleb's that guy. If you want the guy that you're like, he's got more upside than you think with his game, and he's what people think Drake May is, maybe not with quite the arm that May has, but with a lot more of the conceptual skills locked into his game, or maybe a better arm Joe Burrow, in some respects. Maybe some things like, I think of players like that, or maybe a slightly more athletic Matt Ryan. I think about players like that, and I go,
reminds me of Dak.
He reminds you of Dak. There you go. Okay.
He reminds me of, for some reason.
I can see that.
He reminds me of Dak Prescott.
That's great.
He's a fucking tough kid too, man.
Yes, he is.
And that's what I loved about Dak Prescott, especially early on in his career when he ran a bit more. Dude's tough.
Yeah.
But even now, Dak Prescott, just so cerebral.
Yeah.
Just absolute surgeon. Kid's fun, man. I love that.
So who's yours?
Well, I was gonna stay in Indiana and go Omar Cooper Jr. because I just love the tape, but I'll go away from that and go a guy who's probably going to be a day 3 pick. And this is, in my opinion, and we'll probably talk about this in the next few weeks here, but this is not a great running back class.
Huh.
At least I don't think so. I'm about 12 backs in.
Okay.
Robert Henry Jr. from UTSA. I really liked his tape. The first game The first game that I turned on was A&M because typically
Yes.
the big thing is that when I watch tape of smaller school guys, right? Your mid major types. I'm like, all right, who's the biggest baddest wolf they played? I want to see them versus the bad wolf. And holy cow,
He tore their ass a new one.
holy shit! I mean, I'm like, I didn't expect him to look like the best player on the field. Like
Yeah.
just didn't expect it because it's A&M.
Yeah.
This is the first game. Like,
And
dude,
they were good this year.
they're good. And they're at home.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're like it's a good team. Crowds riled up.
You're mute. There you go.
He had 177 and 2 on freaking 16 carries.
Yeah.
I'm like, who is this kid? And it wasn't like it was like, all right, just super wide open up the sideline runs. Like,
No.
no, he made the 3 tech miss, climbed to the second level, put a move on the backer, outran the safety for 35 yards, and took it to. I mean, I was floored. And you look at the first 4 games, like
Yeah.
he averaged 156 yards on 9.5 yards a carry, and he had 9 touchdowns in their first 4 games. After that, I have no idea what happened in UTSA. I think that's tough about mid majors too. Is if they have 2 injuries up front, cooked, absolutely screwed. Especially when they start to play better fronts. But I mean, holy cow! I mean, I loved his combination of quickness and power at the second level.
Yep.
I thought he was one of the better decision makers.
Yep.
In terms of the ability to get out of the mud, because that happened a lot with their offensive line, like especially like their interior runs, they get blown up a good bit. But his ability to, there's a play against, I think it was freaking Tulane, when 3 tech blows up, backsteps, cuts the outside and gets like 20. When most backs, you're dead to rights and you're toast. But he has a lot of movement tools that you don't see as much from mid-major backs, right? You see them from higher end power 4 guys. Like, I thought that I was turning on Le'Veon Moss's game. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, I thought that like I would think that highly of Le'Veon Moss, but I thought higher of Robert Henry Jr. when I watched him. And he's one of the better backs in this cycle, in my opinion.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
He was I sent a early fall scouting report to my RSP subscribers in the newsletter with a full scouting report on Robert Henry, because I had finished that report basically by early October. I think late September, early October.
Sure.
And it was like you're looking at a James Cook type of talent, like in terms of
100%.
running the football. He's that kind of player. And yeah, he's going to be in the conversation for me as a priority pick for you based on value. He's probably going to be a priority value pick. I have him as someone that he can run inside zone, he can run gap, he can definitely work outside for you. I think the receiving skills are pretty good. I think if I remember correctly, I'll have to look at what I had him as a blocker, but let's see what I have. Yeah, blocking needs a little bit of work. But the pass catching ability is strong. So as a guy who can leak out,
didn't do it frequently,
Yeah.
but it was there. I guess that's kind of what I wrote too. It was there. I mean, look, like it's really just a usage based thing collegiately too. It's like, is that how your offense is operating? And they didn't at UTSA. He wasn't a big time receiver, obviously, out of the backfield. But yeah, no, I mean he was awesome. I mean, he was a lot of fun to watch.
I love that call. I haven't watched him in months, but he's been a favorite. Like, yeah, so I'm so glad you liked him too. Like, he's 5'9", 206, so he's not the biggest guy. At least that's the listed height and weight before the East-West Shrine game. He might be different at that point.
Sure,
but I don't care if he's 195.
No, it doesn't.
He runs so smart. It's fine. Okay, cool. So let's we got a little bit of time left. So we'll save Emmett Johnson talk. We'll save Matt Nagy and Jackson Dart. I think we need to probably go into detail on both of those. So let's just end it on this. I saw something last week that intrigued me. There are some in our fantasy sphere and draftnik sphere were like, with the way things are going in the NFL, with 12 and 13 personnel, they got to put wide receivers in the slot sometimes to play in that role, or put them inside and bunch them up in there, and that, or that when they do play the slot, it's an important position because they're going to get the most targets and the widest range of targets. So let's look back at receivers in college and who had the highest snap share rate from the slot. They had guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. They had, A.J. Brown, JSN, a lot of the big heavy-hitting names that you would see recently. And like the lowest guy on the list in terms of percentage snap was Malik Neighbors, as in terms of guys who've had success in the pros. And Neighbors still spent 58% of his time in the slot. And the point they were making was, let's look at Mekhi Lemon and Carnell Tate. And they looked at Mekhi Lemon, and Mekhi Lemon spends a shit ton of time in the slot, so he passed the test of the threshold. I think Carnell Tate was something like 18% or something.
14%.
14%. There we go.
It's 14%.
So they're like, ooh, this guy, he's the Classic X. Everybody's really enamored with the Classic X, but maybe we should be a little wary about that, especially with the way where things are. So I get the value of modeling things like that, but then I think to myself, all right, so can I easily find guys who didn't play much in the slot, who got featured in the slot later, when they got to the NFL and did just fine? Because to me, it's more about, can you run a route? Can you catch the football? And yes, the slot is harder in terms of diagnosing things, but if you show me enough skill as a route runner, I'm usually pretty good that they're going to be able to translate to the slot, if
sure.
it need be. And so the first guy I thought of was Drake London. Drake London played outside. So I looked at him and I looked at his snap shares. And with London, true enough, his first 2 years, I think it was 2 to 3 years, 2 years, that's what it was. He had like 59% and 40-something% in the slot. And you're like, that's enough. That's good. That means that he can do it. But then you look at that's the percentage, but not the production. Like those 2 years combined equaled what he did in his final season. And in his final season, he spent 94% of the time outside. So so I'm like, is it about that they can do the slot work, or is it the amount of time they really spent? So then I thought, can I find another example? And I thought, yeah, I bet I can find another example. I'm going to give you one right now. I looked him up before the show. I didn't even think about it again because this last week I saw it and I go, Drake London, that's a good example. Fine. Let me think of another though. And I thought, Jamar Chase. Let me see what Jamar Chase was at. Jamar Chase played 2 years in school. Now, his first season, he had like 300 yards receiving. So he really didn't have much. And unfortunately, the system that I have, that the database that I had, didn't track his 2018 season. But even if he was at 80% in the slot, I mean, there's a difference between catching 300 yards worth of balls and catching 1,700 yards worth of balls the next year. Okay? So the year that he had 1,700 yard season, he spent a total of 11% of the time in the slot. Right. He was 80% wide on one side, 3% wide on the other, and then a total of, 10, 15, 17% everywhere else. Was basically,
sure.
So I look at that and I go, we see Jamar Chase in the slot all the time in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So I like where that stat's going, but my thought would be, Brandon, it's like, if you look at the route runner and you look at what they can do, can they tell a story? Can they read the field? Can they read a defense and look at the leverage and understand how to adjust, even from the outside? Then I'm going to be confident that they can probably play from the slot if they want them to. I know that Carnell Tate may not be, while I like him as a Justin Jefferson type of player, I think he's more fluid than people say. I think he can tell a story, and I think he's so fundamentally sound. Like Lemon are automatic with tracking a football and attacking a football. Like as clean at those two things as I have seen in a while from some guys. So, my thoughts are you might favor Mekhi Lemon based on that production especially if he lands on a team that's going to use him in the slot and they're going to go slot heavy. Totally cool with that idea. But I wouldn't necessarily bash Tate because he doesn't fit that model.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think it's honestly one of those items that's overblown.
Right.
Because here goes this. You look at the NFL now, and it's a lot more 12 and 13 personnel than in years past, right? And I think we're trending towards that we don't have to get into it, but we're trending towards that more so because you're attacking nickel corners, right? You're attacking different personnel groupings, two high safeties, right? You're trying to make it so you can control the game. And in doing so, you essentially kick your extra receiver off the field, you put in an extra tight end, and off you go. So you're not seeing a lot of, slot receivers, quote unquote, play in 12 and 13 because unless like you're in twins, you're not inside. So you're going to have to learn how to run routes on the boundary. What ends up happening is now, and I've noticed this, offenses are really focusing on the skill set of their best receiver. Not a lot of offenses have like three good receivers or even sometimes two good receivers, but mostly it's one guy is great and the other guys are good enough to start, but you want to get the game plan is centered on the guy who is great. Like Drake London is a fantastic example, right? The goal is to get Drake London the ball in as many ways as we possibly can. Darnell Mooney is awesome. Kyle Pitts is awesome, but they are not Drake London. JSN is the best example we can give, right? It's moved around the formation. He's off the backfield, inside, outside, motioning in, motioning out. Doesn't really matter where he's playing because his skill set is what the offense revolves around in the passing game. And so same with Carnell Tate. Everything is just so clean that he wins on the outside. Why would we bump him inside? You have another alpha receiver in Jeremiah Smith. So if you have a player that can win on the boundary 9 times out of 10, you're not bumping him inside. You're just not doing it. You'd rather take the one-on-one. That's what you're getting. Things are a little bit muddier in the middle of the field. You take the boundary guy because he's going to win his matchup 9 times out of 10 if he's a good player, and Carnell Tate is. So for me, I don't look at that as much. I look at how they win. Can they win across the field? Can they beat a corner outside the numbers? Can they high point? Are there items that lead me to believe that they can run routes from any formation? Because that's the biggest thing, right? If you are a boundary-only receiver, well, then you are in massive trouble in the NFL. Keon Coleman, right? Yep. Xavier Legette. These are guys that are boundary-only guys because they don't have the movement skill to play inside. And that's really what it is. If you're a skilled enough mover to be able to diagnose coverage, understand how to change and alter route depth based on what the defense gives, but also, too, how the design of the play allows you to, then that's great. But if you can't and don't have the movement skill to do it, you can't play inside. Like Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette were supposed to be 1,000-yard receivers by now. That's a They're two organizations thought.
Yep.
But the reason they aren't is they can't play in another area of the field. They just are
Yeah.
good enough movers.
There you have it. I mean, listen, um, this was a fun show. Without a shadow of a doubt, I think we had a good time with it. I think we're going to have more that we're going to really want to dig into. So thanks for Brandon, as always, for partnering up with me.
Absolutely.
Um, check him out at Angelo's Analysis. You can check me out at the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. And, buy the work. You guys, this is a taste of what we do. And you're gonna be more than happy with the outcome of your purchase decision. So, thanks again, everybody, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.